It is not guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Toxic shame says, I am something wrong. That is the difference. And it is everything. Guilt is about behavior. It points to a specific action and says that action caused harm and should not be repeated. Guilt has an object. It has edges. It can be addressed and resolved and released. Toxic shame is about identity. It does not say you did something bad. It says you are bad. Not what you did. Not how you behaved in a specific moment. Not the action that could be corrected, or the choice that could be made differently. You, fundamentally, at the core, in the place that cannot be addressed or resolved, because it is not about something you did. It is about something you are. And this distinction, this specific, devastating distinction between guilt and toxic shame, is the reason toxic shame is so difficult to work with. Because you cannot correct what you are. You can change behavior. You can make amends. You can do differently. But if the problem is not your behavior, but your existence, if the feeling is not, I did something wrong, but I am something wrong, there is nowhere to go with it. It just sits in the body, running quietly, organizing everything. You have been carrying this, maybe for so long that you do not remember a time before it. Maybe without a name for it. Maybe calling it low self-esteem, or insecurity, or not being confident enough, or just being too sensitive, or simply knowing how you are. This video is going to give you the name for it, where it comes from, how it was installed, what it does to every area of your life, how the narcissist found it and used it against you with devastating precision, and how you begin, slowly, imperfectly, with more patience than seems reasonable, to separate who you actually are from what toxic shame has convinced you that you are. Stay until the very end, because the last section contains the most important thing I will say. Let me start with where toxic shame comes from, because this matters enormously. Because understanding the origin is what begins to separate the shame from the self. Toxic shame almost always originates in childhood, in a specific kind of environment. Not necessarily one with obvious cruelty, not necessarily one that would look harmful from the outside, but one where a child's experience of themselves was consistently organized around being wrong, being too much or not enough, being a problem or a disappointment, being the reason things went wrong, being something that required managing, correcting, improving, fixing. Children are egocentric, not in a selfish way, but in a developmental way. When something goes wrong in a child's world, when a parent is angry, or withdraws, or is unavailable, or responds with contempt, the child does not conclude that something is wrong with the parent. They conclude something is wrong with them, because that conclusion is more survivable. If the parent is the problem, the person the child depends on for everything, the world is random and threatening and uncontrollable. If the child is the problem, the child can fix themselves, do better, be different, earn the safety back. The self-blame is a survival strategy, and it is so effective, so immediately anxiety-reducing, that it becomes the default. Something goes wrong. I am the reason. Someone is upset. I caused it. I am not receiving love right now. I must be undeserving of it. This calculus runs so automatically and so early that by the time the child is old enough to question it, it is not an idea anymore. It is identity. The specific feeling of being fundamentally, irreparably, at the core, wrong. Not what they did, what they are. This is toxic shame. And it does not stay in childhood. It follows the person everywhere, into every relationship, into every room, into every interaction where they might be evaluated or found wanting or seen clearly. Because the terror underneath toxic shame is not the shame itself. It is being seen. Because if you are seen, really seen, what will be found is the wrongness you have always known was there. So you hide. Not consciously, not deliberately. You perform. You manage. You present the version that is acceptable, while keeping the version that is wrong carefully out of view. And you are exhausted. From the performance, from the management, from the constant monitoring of how much of yourself is showing, and whether what is showing is good enough. Now let me show you how the narcissist finds it, because this is the part that is hardest to understand until you have the full picture. Narcissists do not create your toxic shame. They find it. They find it because it is visible to them in ways it may not be visible to you. In the way you explain yourself too much. In the way you apologize before anyone has said you did anything wrong. In the way you read the room. That specific hypervigilance, that constant monitoring of whether you are okay with this person. In the way you need reassurance in forms that other people without this wound do not seem to need. In the ease with which you accept blame. In the speed with which you doubt yourself when someone provides an alternative explanation of your experience. A narcissist, especially a covert narcissist, reads these signs not consciously, but in the way a predator reads the landscape for vulnerability. And they know. This person has a wound here, and this wound can be used. Not necessarily as a calculated strategy in the beginning, not as a blueprint they followed deliberately, but as an instinct. A recognition that this person's relationship with themselves has a specific quality that makes certain things possible in the relationship. Specifically, making you feel that your perception is the problem, that your feelings are the problem, that your needs are excessive, that your reactions are disproportionate, that you are too much or not enough in whatever specific way is most destabilizing to you. And here is why toxic shame makes you uniquely vulnerable to this. Healthy shame, the functional kind, serves as information. It says something I did caused harm, and I should address it. Healthy shame also has a reference point. You can hold a bad action and still hold a fundamentally positive relationship with yourself. You can acknowledge doing something wrong without concluding you are wrong. Toxic shame has no such reference point. When someone with toxic shame is told they are wrong about their perception, their feelings, their needs, their reactions, there is no stable sense of self to push back from. Because the sense of self already believed it was wrong. The gaslighting lands like confirmation. You thought you might be perceiving things correctly, but the shame underneath already suspected you were not trustworthy, already believed your perception was probably unreliable. already knew, on some level, that something was wrong with you. And so, the narcissist's rewriting of your experience does not feel like manipulation. It feels like the truth you already knew. This is why toxic shame is the narcissist's most useful tool. Not because they created it, because you have been living with it since childhood, and they simply aimed at it. Now, let me show you what toxic shame does to your life. In your relationship with yourself, in your relationships with others, in your body, in your ability to receive love, in your work and your ambitions, and the size of the life you allow yourself. The first thing toxic shame does is organize your entire life around hiding. Not running, not fighting, hiding. The specific management of what is seen so that the wrongness at the core is never exposed. This hiding takes different forms. Overachievement. If I am impressive enough, the wrongness will not be noticed. People-pleasing. If I am useful enough, agreeable enough, easy enough, no one will look closely enough to find it. Perfectionism. If nothing I do can be criticized, nothing will be found. Invisibility. If I make myself small enough, there is nothing to see. All different expressions of the same management strategy. Keep the real thing out of view. The second thing toxic shame does is make you a reliable acceptor of blame. Because if the shame already believes something is wrong with you, then when something goes wrong and someone offers you as the explanation, the shame says, yes, yes, that fits. That is what I have always known. The narcissist offers this explanation repeatedly, consistently, across every conflict and disappointment and difficulty in the relationship. And the shame, that old, established, deeply believed sense of fundamental wrongness, accepts it every time, because it already believed it. The third thing toxic shame does is make love feel dangerous, because love requires being seen, and being seen, truly seen, risks the core wound being discovered, risks someone finally finding what the shame has always known was there. And so intimacy, real intimacy, triggers the shame. You pull back. You perform. You present the acceptable version and keep the real version carefully managed. And the people who love you sense it. The distance, the management, the performance where the person should be. And they cannot close it, because you will not let them. Because letting them close, all the way close, risks the thing the shame has been protecting for so long. Now, I need to stop here and speak to you directly, because I know what is happening right now. You are recognizing something. You are recognizing yourself in this. Not with surprise exactly, with the specific, quiet recognition of something you have always known but never had exact language for. And there is something happening that is both relief and grief. Relief because it has a name. Grief because of how long you have been carrying it. I need to tell you something. The shame that has organized your life, the sense of fundamental wrongness that sits underneath everything, is not the truth about you. It is a conclusion a child reached in an environment that made that conclusion feel like the only survivable one. It is not evidence of what you actually are. It is evidence of what you survived. And those are not the same thing. Now, what actually helps? The first thing is the distinction I gave you at the beginning. Guilt is about behavior. Shame is about identity. When the shame arrives, when that specific feeling of fundamental wrongness rises, the first practice is to ask, is there something I did that requires attention? Or is this the old feeling, the one that is about what I am rather than what I did. If there is something to address, address it. If there is not, the shame is the signal that the old wound has been activated, not the truth about you. The old wound. Those are different. The second thing is understanding that toxic shame lives in secrecy. The shame researcher Brené Brown, whose work on shame is the most important in this field, says that shame cannot survive being spoken. Not because speaking it makes it disappear, because speaking it brings it into contact with a witness. And shame's power is that it convinced you that if anyone saw the real thing, the wrongness, they would confirm it. Speaking it to a safe person, a therapist, a trusted friend, someone who can receive it without confirming the verdict, is how you begin to test that belief. And repeatedly testing it, repeatedly sharing the thing shame says cannot be shared, and repeatedly finding that the witness does not confirm the verdict, builds, over time, an alternative to the shame's account. The third thing is separating the conclusion from the evidence. The shame's conclusion, I am fundamentally wrong, was reached by a child in a specific environment with limited information and enormous developmental need to make sense of a world that was not making sense. That conclusion made survival possible in that moment. It is not the objective truth about your character. And the work, slow and non-linear and requiring enormous patience, is building a body of evidence that contradicts the conclusion. Not by arguing with the shame, not by telling yourself you should feel differently, but by accumulating experiences in therapy, in safe relationships, in the small daily practice of not hiding, that provide data the shame cannot account for. Data that says the wrongness the shame identified is not what people who see you clearly actually find. The fourth thing is understanding what you actually are underneath the shame, because the shame is not the whole story. Underneath the performance and the management and the hiding, there is a person with specific, particular, irreplaceable qualities. Qualities that the shame convinced you were not good enough or too much or wrong in some fundamental way, but which are, in fact, the most real thing about you. Your sensitivity that the shame called weakness. Your capacity for depth that the shame called being too much. Your desire for genuine connection that the shame called neediness. Your perception that the narcissist called unreliable. These are not flaws. These are you. Underneath everything the shame has told you about yourself, still there, still true, still worth claiming. And now, the thing I promised. The most important thing. The toxic shame that has organized your life, the feeling that you are fundamentally, irreparably wrong, is a lie. Not a small lie, not an exaggeration. A lie. A conclusion reached under impossible conditions by a person who did not have the information or the developmental capacity or the external support to reach any other conclusion. The shame is not what you found when you looked honestly at yourself. It is what you found when you looked at yourself through the eyes of people who could not see you clearly. Through the eyes of a parent who could not provide what you needed and made their failure your identity. Through the eyes of a narcissist who found your wound and aimed at it and used your shame's readiness to believe itself against you. Through the eyes of every person who confirmed the verdict because confirming it served them. Not through your own eyes, not through the eyes of someone who sees you clearly and loves what they see. That version of being seen, the version where you are looked at clearly, and what is found is not the wrongness the shame promised, but something else entirely, is what healing makes possible. You were never what the shame said you were. You were the person the shame was built to protect.
And that person, the one underneath all of it, has been waiting the whole time for you to find your way back. It is not too late. It was never too late. If this video gave you language for something that has been running quietly underneath everything for longer than you can remember, please share it with one person who is still calling their toxic shame the truth about themselves. Tell them what it actually is. Tell them where it came from. Tell them it is not too late. Subscribe, because this channel exists to tell you the truth about what you have been carrying and what you actually are underneath it. I will see you in the next one.